The Archbishop's Hour, 98.9 Albuquerque, 104.5 Santa Fe, 91.7 Clovis, 95.3 Farmington, 100.7 Gallup Grants, 88.7 Portales, 103.1 Santa Rosa, 99.9 Socorro, now bring you local news and information of interest to the Archdiocese of Santa Fe and the state of New Mexico. The Archbishop's Hour is brought to you from the Catholic Center here in Albuquerque. Now, here is your host, Mary Woods.
Welcome to the Archbishop's Hour. We're broadcasting on Immaculate Heart Radio to our New Mexico listeners in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe and the Diocese of Gallup. We are here due to the leadership of Archbishop Michael Sheehan to inform, foster, and deepen the message of the Gospel and the Catholic Church. I'm your host, Mary Woods, and our producer is Abed Archuleta. Later in the program, we'll focus on Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Santa Fe with our guests here in the studio, Director of the Center for Refugee Resettlement and Support, Marshall Jensen, and with him, Coordinator for the same center, Janis Benton, and in-kind developer, Cita Arranaga. And today we'll hear a meditation on today's Gospel, brought to you by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And now, before we get to that and our news segment of the day, let's hear about our saint of the day.
This is Saint of the Day for March 13th from the Franciscans and St. Anthony Messenger Press. Today we celebrate St. Leander of Seville. The next time you recite the Nicene Creed at Mass, think of today's saint, for it was Leander of Seville who, as bishop, introduced the practice in the 6th century. He saw it as a way to help reinforce the faith of his people and as an antidote against the heresy of Arianism, which denied the divinity of Christ. By the end of his life, Leander had helped Catholicism flourish in Spain at a time of political and religious upheaval. Leander's own family was heavily influenced by Arianism, but he himself grew up to be a fervent Catholic. He entered a monastery as a young man and spent 3 years in prayer and study. At the end of that tranquil period, he was made a bishop. For the rest of his life, he worked strenuously to fight against heresy. The death of the anti-Catholic king in 586 helped Leander's cause. He and the new king worked hand in hand to restore orthodoxy and a renewed sense of morality. Leander succeeded in persuading many Arian bishops to change their loyalties. Leander died around 600. In Spain, he is honored as a doctor of the Church. There's more about the saints, along with inspiration and Catholic resources, at our website, franciscanradio.org. From the Franciscans and St. Anthony Messenger Press, this is Saint of the Day.
In today's Gospel, Peter asks Jesus a question. How often should we forgive a brother who offends us? Peter suggests that perhaps 7 times would be a generous offer. Scripture scholar Father Raymond Brown notes that at this point, we who know Jesus' answer are inclined to criticize Peter. How stingy! We know Jesus is going to respond with a whopping 77 times, suggesting forgiveness without limit. But, Father Brown comments, who among us, realistically, might squeeze out a second and just maybe a third act of forgiveness? After that, wouldn't we say enough? At that point, Father Brown says, Peter's looking pretty good. And that makes Jesus' rule for forgiveness even more generous. It is, in fact, the generosity of God. I remember talking over this gospel text with a Franciscan confrere one weekend as I was writing my homily. I told him I was having trouble coming up with something to say. Teasing, but with a lot of truth behind his words, he reminded me that I often brought up stories of times I'd been offended by a couple of our Franciscan brothers. Years later, I had still not forgiven them. And my confrere left me with a lot to think about and a good homily. I'm ashamed to admit there are many people in my life I still need to forgive. I'm still giving that homily to this day. On this Lenten Tuesday, I pray, Jesus, teach us the unlimited forgiveness you commanded Peter. May we never forget how many times we've been forgiven, and then be ready to show forgiveness to others. Amen.
You're listening to Archbishop's Hour Catholic Radio at 98.9 FM in Albuquerque, 104.5 in Santa Fe, and 100.7 in Gallup. From the Catholic News Service, car bomb explodes outside Nigerian church, 10 die in the blast. A suicide car bomber attacked a Catholic church as Mass was being celebrated, killing 3 people and sending dozens of worshippers fleeing into the streets, officials said. 7 others died in retaliatory rioting that erupted March 11th in the central Nigeria city of Jos, authorities reported. On Sunday evening, gunmen killed 3 Christians in a village south of the city, said Pam Ayuba, Plateau state spokesman. She said officials did not believe the shootings were connected to the violence at St. Finbar Church earlier in the day. The incidents are the most recent in a decade-long conflict among Christians and Muslims that has claimed thousands of lives in and around Jos. Ayuba said the blast damaged the church's roof, blew out its windows, and destroyed a portion of the fence surrounding the church's compound, the Associated Press reported. The bombing led to retaliatory violence by youths who set fire to homes. Soldiers guarding the city opened fire in neighborhoods, witnesses said. Government and relief officials told AFP that in addition to those killed in the bombing and afterward, 24 people were injured, including several soldiers. Several of the victims were critically injured, authorities said. From Vatican Radio, UN expert says Iran violating human rights.
Over 600 prisoners were executed by Iran during 2011. That's according to a UN human rights expert. Ahmed Shahid, the special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Iran, yesterday told the UN Human Rights Council that it gathered credible evidence to the effect that human rights violations are rampant in the country. These included arbitrary detention, torture, as well as restrictions to freedoms of expression, association, and assembly.
In many cases, witnesses reported that they were arrested for activities protected by international law and that they were detained in solitary confinement for prolonged periods with no access to legal counsel or family members and in the absence of formal charges. Individuals also frequently reported the use of torture for the purposes of soliciting confessions. Several stated that they were subjected to prison conditions that fall well below the minimum standards defined by the UN. A majority of those interviewed maintained that they were denied reasonable access to legal counsel and that they and/or their lawyers were denied access to evidence, case files, or witnesses testifying against them. And in some cases, judges reportedly issued verdicts on the basis of coerced confessions in trials that only lasted several minutes.
You're listening to Archbishop's Hour Catholic Radio at 95.3 FM in Farmington, 88.7 in Portales, and 91.7 in Clovis. And finally, from the Catholic News Service, water is human right, not a for-profit commodity, says Vatican Council. Clean and potable water is a human right, not a for-profit commodity dependent on market logic, said the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace in a recent document. Unfortunately, there persists an excessively commercial conception of water which runs the risk of mistaking it for just another kind of merchandise and making investments for the sake of profit alone without taking into account water's worth as a public good, it said. There is a risk of not seeing one's brothers and sisters as human beings possessing the right to a dignified existence, but rather seeing them as simply customers, which leads to making water and sanitation available only to those who can pay, it added. The document, Water, an Essential Element for Life, is an update to previous documents of the same title by the Council. The update, which focused on effective solutions to the world's water crisis, was presented at the 6th World Water Forum, being held March 12th through the 17th in Marseille, France. The Vatican released a copy of the document on March 12th. Representing the Vatican, members of the Justice and Peace Council attended the forum, along with leaders from government, private enterprises, and local communities, in an effort to study and develop just and sustainable policies and practices concerning the world's water resources. While the international community has recognized access to clean and potable water as a human right, About half of the world's population still does not have guaranteed access to potable water, and more than 1 billion people have no access to proper sanitation, the document said. The Vatican delegation said effective solutions were urgently needed and underlined that individual communities and nations could not solve the problem alone. Solutions required international commitment, cooperation, and enforcement, it said. And that's it for our news segment of the day. We do have announcements, and we'll start off with the announcement from the Family Life Office, a weekend for the engaged in Spanish. Nos vamos a casar. With apologies for my bad Spanish. Preparation for the sacrament of matrimony. A weekend for the engaged in Spanish will be held on March 31st through April 1st here at the Catholic Center in Albuquerque. The cost is $50 per couple, which includes textbooks, meals, and refreshments. However, lack of funds should not hinder any engaged couple from attending. Financial assistance is available if you need it. For more information and to register, you can call the Family Life Office at 831-8117 here in Albuquerque, or you can call Deacon Rudy or Lucille Zamora in Belen at 864-8872. 864-8872. Nos vamos a casar, March 31st through April 1st. That's the weekend for the engaged in Spanish. Again, it will be held here at the Catholic Center in Albuquerque, 4000 St. Joseph Place, Northwest. Coming up this Sunday, March 18th, at the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Parish, there will be a young adult faith-sharing 2012 Lenten Journey. And this is for young adults ages 19 to 35. The time, 11:30 a.m. It starts with Mass, and then 12:30 to 1:30 at the Parish Center. The Lenten Journey faith-sharing will continue on the theme Affirmation and Transformation, or the Pharisee within. Again, this is for young adults ages 19 to 35. Young adults are asked to join in faith sharing and prayer during the Lenten season. For more information, you can call the Youth and Young Adult Ministry office at 831-8142, 831-8142, or this Sunday, just go to the 11:30 a.m. Mass at Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Parish in Albuquerque. That's on Upper 4th Street. Also, some wonderful events coming up. When I Was Hungry, an evening conversation with Peter Kimeu, and he is with the Catholic Relief Services from Kenya. Join us to hear Catholic Relief Services speaker Peter Kimeu from Kenya talk from his own personal experience about the difference U.S. Catholics make through Operation Rice Bowl and CRS. Peter will speak and then take participant questions and comments. Fair trade coffee and chocolate will be served. This is going to be Wednesday, March 21st from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. The event is free, open to everyone, and it will be hosted at Risen Savior Catholic Community, their Marian Center Gathering Hall, located at 7701 Wyoming Boulevard Northeast in Albuquerque. And for more information, you can always call 831-8167, 831-8167. I believe that's the Office for Social Justice here at the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. Something also, just a reminder of something coming up this Sunday, the annual Cursillo Ultrea at Holy Family Parish in Albuquerque. It begins with 8 a.m. registration. It's $15 per person, $25 for couples. And for more information, you can call Juan Montoya at 505-440-8459. 505-440-8459 for the annual Cursillo Ultrea on March 18th. Also, don't forget Holy Ghost Parish Lenten Mission with Deacon Jorge A. Gonzalez, director of the Diaconate Formation Program from the Diocese of Brooklyn, New York. He will present the Lenten Mission. The theme is They Will Look on the One They Have Pierced at Holy Ghost Parish, March 26th and 27th from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the church. For more information, call the parish office, 265-5957, 265-5957. And since we're getting further afield in March, Monday, March 26th at 6:30 p.m., you can hear the sounds of the Schola Cantorum of Santa Fe. They will be performing at the Loma, Colorado Public Library in Rio Rancho. And this concert is free. The Journey of St. Patrick will include ancient chants from the Celtic world, from Ireland. Of course, Schola Cantorum of Santa Fe is a group. They sing Gregorian chant and ancient sacred music. I think they might also include some ballads. The Journey of St. Patrick, Monday, March 26th, 6:30 p.m. It is free, this concert of Schola Cantorum of Santa Fe, and it will be in Rio Rancho at the Loma, Colorado Public Library. And finally, coming up Saturday, March 24th, as part of the Norbertine series, this is the Norbertine community in Albuquerque, a presentation from 9:30 a.m. to noon, Living Compassionately in the Buddhist Tradition with Doug Booth as the presenter. Doug Booth is a meditation teacher and attorney, and he's also the founder and a teacher with the Heart Mountain Prison Project. And he will present this is part of the Living Compassionately series at the Norbertine Priory. So Living Compassionately in the Buddhist Tradition with Doug Booth, Saturday, March 24th, 9:30 a.m. to noon. It will be held at the Norbertine Priory. And for more information, you can call 873-4399. That's here in Albuquerque, 873-4399. However, there is no charge and no registration is necessary for the Saturday, March 24th presentation. I understand that you can always make a free will donation. They're always appreciated, and it helps defray the costs of the programs. That's it for our announcements. We'll be back with my guests after this break. Please stay with us.
Hi, I'm Jeff Turcott, the Director of Student Activities at St. Pius X High School. I wanted to make a plea to our Catholic community for a very special need. Our Catholic school 8th graders took the entrance exam for St. Pius X at their respective schools last month and should be in the process of gathering grades and recommendations to be considered for admission to St. Pius X. Sadly, only 65% of the young men and women in the 8th grade will end up continuing their Catholic education with us. Nearly all who do not come to St. Pius don't come because of financial issues. I love visiting our Catholic schools through each year, seeing our young people in their plaid skirts and uniforms. My hope is that we can raise more financial support for these beautiful children so that they can continue the great Catholic education with us at St. Pius X High School. This Lenten season, why not consider donating to our financial aid drive? Your dollars will keep our future in the Catholic school system. Go online to stpius10th.com or call 831-8400 today. Help us help our young people, the future of our church. On behalf of our students who can only afford St. Pius X, with your generosity, a sincere thank you.
Welcome back to Archbishop's Hour. You're listening to us at 91.7 FM in Clovis, 99.9 FM in Socorro, and 88.3 in Tucumcari. I may have finally gotten 2 R's trilled in Socorro, but don't laugh too much. I say this to my guests here in the studio. They're just putting up with me, I think. And they're very kind. Today we're talking about Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. We have a show once a month devoted to this work. It is so powerful, it's so important, and it's so vivid and has such a great effect in our communities right here in New Mexico. So the guests around the table are Marshall Jensen. He's the director of the Center for Refugee Resettlement and Support. He's brought along with him Cita Arranaga, who is the in-kind developer. We're going to hear more about that. That's something very specific and rather important. And we also have Janis Benton. She also does work that is specific and important. She's the coordinator for the Center for Refugee Resettlement and Support. We're going to hear more about each of these aspects of the work. But I want to start with Marshall Jensen. He's the guy in charge here. And I'd love to hear about the special grant award from HUD, but that's not specifically in your center. So let's hear the update on the Center for Refugee Resettlement and Support first.
So just to remind your listeners, Mary, the Center for Refugee Settlement and Support works in partnership with the federal government to resettle refugees to the Albuquerque area. So individuals who've fled conflicts abroad are resettled through the United States government and received by communities like ours in Albuquerque. And organizations like Catholic Charities provide services to those individuals once they reach our community. So our work in the Archdiocese actually dates back to the 1960s, and over the course of the last 40 years, we've continued doing this mission and continue doing it to this day.
This is an important thing to remember because we're going to hear a lot about the partnerships. Term partnership, very important, but when we talk about federal government with Catholic Charities throughout the country, or specifically here in New Mexico, we're talking about also a partnership of funding. And can you give us the update on how that balance is working right now? I understand that in the past there was a lot of funding, or a major part of your funding was coming from the federal government. It's the federal government who decides who is a refugee and what people and what numbers of people they will welcome into the United States, and then they kind of figure out places where they can be resettled. And that's when they call up Catholic Charities to help out, be the boots on the ground, knowing the area and helping these folks. How much has the money dropped from the federal government? Has it maintained the same for the past several years?
I'll say a couple things about that. Well, the first thing to mention is that we're working with actually three major government agencies that are involved in this process. The first one is the Department of State. The second one is a division of the Department of Health and Human Services called the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And finally, a division of Homeland Security called Citizenship and Immigration Services. All of those entities provide Catholic Charities some funding, either directly or indirectly, for this purpose. As far as whether the money's gone up or down, what we've seen in the last 2 years, and I think I mentioned last time we talked, is that nationwide there's been fewer refugees resettled than was expected in the last 2 fiscal years. Primarily, this has been because of the institution of security background checks for refugees coming. It's not that individuals have been denied, it's that individuals have been slowed in the process to be approved to come here. So there may be not actually a dwindling of numbers, up the pipeline or whatever metaphor I'm trying to use, but it just that there are people who are slowed in their process, so we may actually have a group of people who need to be resettled over several years out. That's correct. What we refer to individuals in the pipeline, and so right now you have a large number of individuals who are waiting to receive all the necessary approvals to come. And that process has slowed greatly because they've instituted what's called interagency checks, which require multiple federal agencies to sign off on the security and the admission of an individual to the United States. And that's just lengthened the process for a lot of individuals. So it's not so much that the refugees aren't there, it's just that the rate that they're coming to the U.S. has slowed.
And how does that affect the funding? Is it established like per person?
In many cases, there's several different grants we're talking about, but many of the grants function on a per capita basis. Mm-hmm. Catholic Charities receives X dollars for receiving X number of individuals. In the case where we don't receive those individuals, we lack the revenue.
Mm-hmm. How does that affect? How does that affect the support of refugees who have been settled here, who you are tracking over a period of time? And I understand that the federal government funding is planned for a much shorter period of time to make sure people are happily acclimated in their communities. It's shorter than the time that Catholic Charities devotes.
The federal government, in theory, provides supports over the course of 5 years. What I think we feel locally, and probably any other resettlement agency feels locally, is that the funding is not in place to truly support individuals over the course of 5 years. So the funding is very much up front, focused on the first 4 to 6 months that individuals are in the country. After that point, the supports diminish drastically. So, but our services do continue for 5 years here in the Archdiocese. We have a number of people who will come back in a year, 2, 3 years after resettlement to receive some kind of services from us. The issue for us as far as the funding and the lower than expected numbers is that we have staffed a program under the assumption that we were going to receive these individuals. And so when we don't receive those individuals, we have an operation that is staffed and structured under the assumption that we're going to receive about 300 of these individuals a year. If we're receiving half or 2/3 of those individuals, all of a sudden we have a disconnect between how we've structured our program and the levels the government funds us at.
So you've got to be able to think on your feet and anticipate what the government may or may not fund and how it may not or may
absolutely
not help.
And I mean, it does behoove us to redouble our private fundraising efforts and to have some additional resources in place, either through grants or donations. We were very fortunate last year. We were one of the few resettlement agencies in the Catholic network that didn't lay off staff, so we were very happy about that.
Wow. I want to introduce my other guests here at the table and hear about what they're doing. Definitely want to hear about this very exciting La Luz Grant Award from HUD. But first, I want to say hello to and welcome Cita Arranaga, in-kind developer. When did you sign on with Catholic Charities to be an in-kind developer? What is that, and what do you see?
Well, I've been with Catholic Charities for about 7 months now, and my job, well, basically what I do is I help resettle refugees. I take in donations, and with those donations, I help furnish the housing for our refugees that we bring in.
What does that mean, in-kind? In-kind developer, as opposed to, we think of a development director, somebody who raises money. What does in-kind mean?
In-kind refers to any non-monetary donation that Catholic Charities receive. So what we generally mean is stuff. We mean furnishings, pots and pans, individuals' time as volunteers. That's all considered an in-kind donation to Catholic Charities.
Does that include cars and bedding and
yes,
flatware for the table and
definitely
any kind of things that people paper towels? Yeah, just any kind of thing that people would need to furnish a house, right?
Definitely things that we take advantage of every day is like, just the little simple things that.
All right. Something that I don't think I ever knew before today, speaking with you before the show. Does Catholic Charities have a place to store, gently used, nice furniture, that nice china set that you set aside but is not chipped and all broken? It's nice, things that can be used, good bedding, things like that. You actually have a place to store that?
We do. We have a big warehouse.
Wow. Okay, we need to get the phone number and how to get things to a warehouse, because I know that our listeners will have things that they often donate, and there's something special about these donations. Would they be tax deductible?
Yes, absolutely.
So when you make this donation, it's tax deductible, but when it's given to the people who need it, they are not charged, and that's probably the most important thing here, right?
That's correct.
All right, we're going to hear more about that. But I do want to hear the voice of lovely Janis Benton, who is also with us here today. She's a coordinator for the Center for Refugee Resettlement and Support. And I'd like to hear about what you do in the Center for Refugee Resettlement and Support. There's so much work that has to be done, and from the paperwork to welcoming people at the airport to finding them a place to live and, handling all the services that are available to them. What do you manage in this center, Janis?
Well, Mary, what I do is I just try to help keep the program going. Marshall has to travel fairly frequently as part of his position, and I try to keep everything running while he's gone. I've been with Catholic Charities 3 years now, and I started as the in-kind developer and worked my way up. I've been a job developer, and now I'm a program coordinator. The program coordinator position kind of fits my skill set a little better than some of the other positions because of my background in computers and accounting. And I help Marshall with a lot of the reporting.
Fabulous. Tell me, though, tell me about the employers' partnership, the things that you work for, having to do with the refugees. This when we look at organizing, we start out with, say, a refugee family. They don't necessarily speak the language, English, or maybe if they're lucky, one person in the family does and the rest don't. They arrive in Albuquerque. Somebody's got to meet them in the airport. They may not be used to, they won't be used to our monetary units. They're not used to how much, what is $1 worth here. They have nothing in terms of, they don't have a household set up yet. They don't have transportation. Hopefully volunteers will meet them and bring them to a place where something's been prepared for them, at least to live for a period of time. After those first couple of days of, now we have food, we have, the clothing and the household is set up. How do people segue into life here? How do they get jobs? And how do you help with making sure that jobs might be available for people in a special kind of employee situation?
Well, one of the first things we do is we sign them up for ESL classes. It's very important that they learn English, because it's very difficult for our clients to get jobs if they don't speak English. Now, it's a little bit easier if they're from our Cuban population, because they speak Spanish, and there's a lot of positions here in town that allow for non-English speakers as long as they speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. But we also, besides the ESL classes, we have a series of, I think it's about 5 weeks worth of orientation classes. And that's welcome to the United States. Here's what we do, and here's how we do it here. And it goes for anywhere from banking
and subjects like health, immigration, employment, transportation, all the basics they're going to need to have their life in the United States.
And then part of it is also the job development portion, which is a very large one. As every refugee that arrives that is an adult is given an assessment by our job developers. Now, some of them may turn out to not, they may be over 65, and so they're not, not really eligible for work, or they may have disabilities. A few have those as well, so it doesn't make sense to try to get them jobs. But those that are healthy and in good condition, there's no reason why they can't get out and find some work. So that's what we do. We jump in and we do our best to try to get them a job. Now, the assessment is fairly extensive that we perform, and that's, trying to find anything that they have done in the past, even overseas, that may help them get a job here. It may be a skill set that they've got, sewing or just laundry work, cooking, and all of these skills that they have.
Is it easier to find employers and to place people who have a range of skills that are very, very basic than it is to place, for instance, someone who's been an engineer?
That's actually one of the issues that we run into is people that are very skilled. It's difficult for them to get a position at the same level that they've had, and it's mainly because of the English, mm-hmm. or the lack thereof of English. That is the most important. That we are finding the most important issue.
Now, anybody in the job market over the past 3 years has more than discovered that whatever your skills, no matter your desire to work and your enthusiasm, it's been a very difficult job market. So where do you find employers that are willing to take somebody who's maybe not familiar with the culture, maybe not strong in the language? Where do you find employers who are going to take these people on? Because it's not like they have their local extended family to help support them and pay their rent. They don't have buddies to say, hey, you could help out in my uncle's, mechanic shop until you get something going. They don't have any of that underpinning. Who helps out here?
That's correct, Mary. It's our refugee individual clients are actually competing with a lot of other people out there that have been laid off from positions. We have some wonderful employers that we've worked with in the past, and they call us when they have jobs available. But we've also got a team of 4 job developers, and they're out beating the streets trying to find more employers that will work with us. As a matter of fact, we recently received a new grant. We were very lucky to be the recipient of this grant, and it's called a Targeted Assistance Grant. But for short, we just call it the TAG grant. And that grant will enable employers to hire our people, and for the first 2 months of employment, the grant will pay for 50% of their salaries.
Wow.
So it's kind of a win-win situation. We are giving or helping people learn the work skills that they need, and it's a discount at a discounted rate for the employer.
The employer gets a break. They're doing good. They're training somebody in, say, these job skills, and what a wonderful incentive plan. Any idea off the top of your head? This is a mean thing to do off the top of your head, but approximately how many employers in the Albuquerque area actively work with you? Whether it's notifying Catholic Charities that, hi, we have some positions, or we have a position open, and it might be good for one of these people. They're usually entry-level positions, I understand. Or any idea how many, Marshall?
I'll say a couple things about that. Over the course of a year, somewhere between 50 and 75 employers will hire individuals.
Wow.
Most of our employers will only take on 1 or 2 individuals. We only have a handful of employers that really take on a large number of individuals. The other thing is, both because of our contractual mandates and also because it's a good practice, our job developers make at least 15 contacts a month with new employers. So each month they're going out and have a quota of how many employers they need to speak with, and they're trying to always find new employers. That really ranges from small mom and pop businesses to your big box stores like Walmart and that sort of place.
Mm-hmm. And can you give us an idea of the kinds of jobs that these refugees, newly resettled in Albuquerque, have available to them?
By and large, they're traditional immigrant jobs. So we place a lot of individuals in food service and hospitality. Your kind of low-wage, low-skill work. Right now, average starting wage is just about $8 an hour for a refugee individual.
So we're talking hotel, restaurant, being a waiter, serving people. Given that hourly wage, how many people does it take, or how many jobs like that does it take to actually pay the rent and help out with a family? Do you have maybe multiple persons in a family who are getting those jobs so that they can all pool together and pay for their food?
Absolutely. I mean, oftentimes we'll have 2 individuals working in a household at least. One of the unfortunate things that we see is at that wage level, you can have 2 adults working in a home and still live below the poverty line. So that's always one of the struggles for many of our families, is that at that wage, kind of regardless of your family size, you're going to either live slightly above or a little below the poverty line in many cases.
This is an important thing to know. About how long could you say on average, Marshall, that one of your refugee families that you would consider a success story, about how long are they kind of riding that level of income, household income, until maybe they have a breakthrough into maybe the better job, something more secure, and a little bit more cash flow?
The first thing I'd say is that the average length of time from arrival to employment is about 150 days, just under 6 months there. The other thing that I would say is, by and large, the first generation of individuals do not necessarily move up into a better, higher paying position. We do see it. It's not unheard of. But as Janis was mentioning, if you take an individual with no English proficiency and perhaps a low skill level, and you place them in a job that they're able to maintain, the likelihood that in any sort of rapid fashion they're going to move up is pretty unlikely. In those cases, what we view our job as is connecting individuals to the services that they'll need over the course of a lifetime. Particularly for the individuals we get who may not read or write in their native language, the process of language acquisition in English, it could be a decade. And in those cases, we feel like our duty is to focus more on those long-term supports and making sure they're connected to the mainstream services in our community that they're going to need over the course of time.
So some of the thing that you're creating, particularly for a multi-generational family, which is, I don't know why I had to use such big words. It's really when you have the parents who come over, maybe even grandparents with children, that you're investing with them in creating a stable environment so that the children, the young people who are now growing up in an American culture, will be able to get the education, will be able to get these things that we so value and that are valuable to have, the successful life, an education, the job, being able to be in the workforce and viable. These would be, in some cases, goals that would not necessarily be the most important thing in the home culture that they're coming from. It's possible, but to have a stable life and a secure life in this country, it's important to have the stable home life so that the kids can do their education.
What we do see in many cases is individuals who haven't been in the workforce. And we'll see that for two primary reasons. In many cultures, not many women enter the workforce. And so we see a lot of mothers who haven't necessarily worked in the past. The other issue is individuals who've been in a refugee camp don't have access to a formal economy. So there's not the same series of shops and commerce that we're used to in a refugee camp. It's a very subsistence lifestyle. So in those cases, when you're talking about individuals spending 10 to 20 years waiting to be resettled, you may not have ever had any formal job. You've been...
Can you make that clear for me and for our listeners? 10 to 20 years in a refugee camp, where we're not talking about a community where there's a normal process of education or job holding or regular commerce and activity. It's an unnatural holding tank.
So what will happen is individuals will leave their country of origin and go to usually a neighboring country. And refugee camps are largely managed by the United Nations. They're pretty minimal places. You don't really have consistent access to sanitation and water and food. Sometimes the violence spills over. There's great variation in their quality and safety, but the average length of time that we're seeing, particularly for certain conflicts, is 10 to 20 years in a camp like that, where they're out of their homeland, can't leave the camp to go into the second country, and they're waiting to be resettled.
about how is that reflected in the paperwork process for the United States in receiving refugees? Is there an added time on top of that? Average time that somebody is going to be in, not intentionally, but they may end up being in a refugee camp for, say, 10 years, from their home country to this strange limbo, and would that be concurrent with, trying to process paperwork to get into the United States, or does that add on to it?
So there's a couple processes going on. What happens is the United Nations is actually the entity that refers people for resettlement. So that's a process that, depending on the volume of refugees that they're processing, could take a very long time. So when you hear about these conflicts with millions of refugees, you're literally talking about millions of individuals that the UN is trying to process. Once those individuals are approved by the United Nations, it gets handed over to the government that will resettle, United States government in this case, and that can be a lengthy process. We're talking 2 to 4 years for the government to fully evaluate an individual's case. It can vary greatly. Some cases end up never arriving. Some cases arrive relatively quickly. It just depends on a lot of circumstances.
And during that time, there are children who can spend half of their lives in a refugee camp without formal education?
Some camps do have some access to formal education. It varies greatly. There's not really an effort to identify individuals who are coming to the United States and then, let's say, teach them English in the camps. But there is some primary and secondary education in some camps. In other places, there's really not much at all in the way of education available to individuals.
And as you said, the home culture may be a situation where women don't normally work. They don't work outside the home. Consequently, learning a language, the mothers may be wonderful mothers, but basically illiterate.
Absolutely.
And in fact, their husbands also. I mean, what is that like? What is that like for a person to arrive in the United States and have their first experience of learning to read and write in a foreign language for them?
I think that language acquisition, when you don't read or write in your native language, is probably one of our biggest challenges. It also, we don't really think on a day-to-day basis how much we rely on written information to guide our way through our lives. And so the combination of not having oral proficiency in English on top of that, and not even really being familiar with a written language in many respects, is a tremendous challenge.
This is just amazing. Now, we're cruising into the last stretch, the home stretch of the show, and I know there are very important things that we want to mention and let our listeners know about. But I hope you'll mention first, because it's a great round of applause is due, the La Luz Grant Award from HUD to Catholic Charities to serve parts of Sandoval County. Congratulations on this. Was $193,000. Just amazing. And I understand that there's also congratulations to Elissa Boza, Director of the Center for Self-Sufficiency and Housing Assistance. She helped to put this together along with a partnership developed with the help of board member Cristina Medina. And the partnership was with Our Lady of Sorrows Parish in Bernalillo. And the whole purpose of this was the program to help single head of household families to maintain stable homes and family life and avoid homelessness. They also mention the help in partnership with Father Stephen Imperato, pastor of Our Lady of Sorrows in Bernalillo. What do you want to say about this?
We're very excited because for a long time now we've had services in Albuquerque and in Santa Fe, and we're now expanding to Sandoval County. So this is exciting. There's going to be housing supports for the individuals you mentioned up in Sandoval County. We recognize that Sandoval County had pretty high needs and that it was an area that was underserved. So this has been a conscious effort to expand out into Sandoval County, and we're excited about starting out there.
Wow. Congratulations to everybody involved. And again, always congratulations with this kind of effort, searching for these kinds of grants. They're not things that just are awarded to Catholic Charities. The people at Catholic Charities go out and look for these grants to be made available to help the people here. And tremendous, tremendous work. Now, something else that we want to make sure we consider before the end of the show is employers and how, if they have jobs available, particularly those entry jobs that they might have available, who do they contact and what is the benefit to them of working with Catholic Charities? Janis?
Well, they can call our front office, which is 724-4670. They can call my office, 724-4691, and I'll put them in contact with the correct person.
Oh, right. And are you always on the lookout for employers who might help with the refugees who come in and need that kind of...
Always. We're always looking for employers that will work with us, and we really appreciate those that will. We, even if it's just one person hired, it means so much to us, and it means so much to that family.
Oh, yeah. And it's the whole learning track of being in the United States, learning the culture, and actually that employer who opens up, a space for someone learning the culture, they become the teachers, the educators, and they're creating a citizen from, right at the get-go.
Right. And work like that is I just can't even tell you how rewarding it is. I think Marshall and Cita and I all agree, that the ability to be able to help someone who comes over here and has nothing or has very little, and then it's so rewarding to help them and see them achieve and learn and work towards becoming Americans eventually.
I like to think of it as we do as Americans, with refugees. We extend a hand the way I would like to think that somebody extended a hand to my great-grandparents and grandparents when they came to this country. Somebody did, some people do, some people don't, but somebody did for those people. And since I couldn't be there to help them out, I like the idea of I'm helping somebody who, further down the pike, their grandkids are going to be Americans, good citizens, and we're the people who are laying in the groundwork for that.
Janis made me think of something, and it's something that a lot of people don't realize, is that literally many people are coming over with nothing. They're not coming with possessions. And I think that for your listeners, it might be interesting to hear about the process from the day you get at the airport to when you get into your new home.
Absolutely. And Cita is going to fill that in and we want to remind people that Catholic Charities can store wonderful things when you get that new, beautiful, on sale, but what a great deal, bedroom set, or the new sofa, and the old one is not completely destroyed, let's face it, if it's still good to go, call up Catholic Charities. They need all of those household things that we take for granted. They may need, packages of wash towels and, just things, sponges for the sink in the kitchen and the furniture. Cita, go ahead, jump in there.
Well, like Marshall said, these families come with nothing, like literally nothing, and this is where we come in. We help get them into their homes, and we help furnish their homes, and we give them like their basics.
What's the first round of furniture that a family coming in with basically an empty apartment, what do they need first?
Well, they're going to need beds, and that's really important, and they also need, just couches, and we get tables. We hardly ever get tables. So
tables and chairs, so important. Any person who's been that like a graduated college student moving into their first apartment knows how bizarre it is to try and live. They'll have a TV, kids will have a TV, but they'll be trying to balance a plate on a knee because they have chairs, but they don't have a table where they can actually put a plate on. Really valuable.
And like your basics, like pots and pans, they need stuff to cook with. So can openers. You wouldn't believe how much you need a can opener for, and what, utensils and things like that. So
what we do is we literally bring people from the airport into their new home. And so to our best effort, we try and bring people into a home that's furnished, that's ready to move into, and that's welcoming. So imagine if you were trying to furnish a house and welcome a family, what would you want in there? And so, I mean, blankets, sheets, beds, furniture, the utensils, everything that you need that are your basics of your life is what we're trying to furnish an apartment with.
And that's what you want to accumulate so it's ready to go. And that's what people, if they have it to donate, that's fabulous. Who do they call to make sure that they can donate wonderful things?
They could call me at 724-4600, and I could take donations. We also have a truck, so we're able to go out and pick up larger items. And we have two wonderful gentlemen that work with us that help us a lot, and so we could pick those up.
So you can make arrangements. If you have, Aunt Sally's dining table that is good, usable, clean, but you never liked it, and it's been taking up room in the garage, just clear it out of your life and send it to somebody who will so enjoy it because they really need it. And that's just tremendously valuable. The Barca Lounger that has been set aside for a while, go ahead, send it. Somebody will be able to use it. And certainly the beds and the towels and, drapes, curtains for windows make someplace look like it's not just a buy station, it makes it look like a home. And this is very, very valuable. So, okay, that number again, Cita Arranaga, will get you fixed up with getting those pieces of furniture picked up, taken away from your house, and given to somebody who needs it. 724-4600, and you can make arrangement for truck pickup for Catholic Charities to help some developing American citizens here.
That's right.
By giving them the best start they could possibly have and giving them a welcome in this country. We've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to let Marshall wrap this up, but I do want to thank you so much, Janis Benton and Cita Arranaga, for your fabulous work and for coming and sharing this with us today. I know our listeners really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
And Marshall?
So just to wrap up a little bit, really our two biggest needs that I think your listeners are interested in are employment and the in-kind things that Cita mentioned. And we're always very grateful to accept any of those. And as Janis was saying, they make a tremendous difference in an individual's lives. We've found many of our employers end up developing almost a preference for some of the individuals that we've referred over for employment. And it ends up being a lasting partnership where both sides get something out of it. So
I think it's phenomenal. And when there are people who, even if their skill set is, in their own country was a little bit higher than, the job that they're getting here, they have someplace to go to. They're also learning the culture. And it's nice to have someone who is willing and interested in working as compared to someone who says, this is just something to hold me for a little while until I want to really go someplace else. That happens all the time. And it's an important thing to appreciate people who you're really helping. That's it for our show. I want to thank Marshall Jensen and all our guests, Janis Benton, Cita Arranaga from Catholic Charities, Archdiocese of Santa Fe. And thank you for listening to Archbishop's Hour Catholic Radio.